The Good Life captured the hearts of audiences in the 1970s with its gentle humor, endearing characters, and a quirky take on self-sufficiency in the British suburbs. It was a show about simplicity, happiness, and escaping the chaos of modern life. But while it brought laughter to millions, real-life sorrow would follow some of the stars who made it so unforgettable. In this tribute, we look back on the cherished cast members who gave us the good life, and who have since said their final goodbyes. Their stories off-screen remind us that even in the brightest comedies, shadows sometimes fall. Richard Briers was born on January 14, 1934, in Rains Park, Surrey, into a Britain gripped by economic uncertainty and looming war. His father, a drama and music critic whose career had faded, fell into depression and drink. The household was strained, often emotionally silent, his mother coping, his father retreating. For young Richard, comedy became armor, the smile a shield. He found refuge in mimicry, in voices not his own, to drown out the arguments in the next room. After a stint in the RAF and training at RADA, he clawed his way into the acting world, not with scandal or grandeur, but through quiet determination and an unrelenting work ethic. Fame came in 1975 with The Good Life, where he played Tom Good, a man who rebels against modern life's emptiness by embracing self-sufficiency. But even as audiences laughed, Richard quietly resented the show's typecasting. He longed for meatier, darker roles, yet found himself forever boxed in as the affable everyman. He hid his disappointments well. Friends called him generous, but privately he battled feelings of insignificance, haunted by the idea that he was never truly taken seriously. Even his foray into Shakespeare with Kenneth Branagh's company, though artistically fulfilling, was met with skepticism by critics. The applause never quite drowned out his self-doubt. His marriage to Anne Davies lasted 6 decades, a rare feat in his industry, but even there, moments of emotional distance crept in. An actor so trained in performance, he sometimes forgot how to simply feel. He had 2 children but often placed his career first, missing more school recitals than he could remember. In 2013, Briers revealed that he had been battling emphysema for 5 years, a result of decades of heavy smoking. He passed away on February 17, 2013, in London, at the age of 79. His net worth at the time was estimated to be $1.9 million. But no amount of money or fame ever quelled the quiet ache of being seen only as funny. Behind every chuckle he gave the world, there was a man who feared he had not done quite enough. Paul Eddington was born on June 18, 1927, in St. John's Wood, London, a city still haunted by the scars of World War I, and about to descend into another. Raised in a modest Quaker household, Paul's early life was shrouded in silence, as if emotions were a currency too precious to spend. His father, a bank clerk turned conscientious objector, was often scorned by neighbors, leaving young Paul torn between shame and admiration. He learned early on to wear a mask, one of gentleness, of diplomacy, which would later define his most iconic role as Jerry Ledbetter in The Good Life. His career was a slow burn, beginning with stage roles that barely paid the rent. He was never the star, always the support. In television, he finally gained recognition, not for grandeur, but for his quiet brilliance. As Jerry, the anxious suburbanite who longed for normalcy amidst his neighbor's chaotic self-sufficiency, Paul infused his own deep yearning for order and peace. But while audiences laughed, Paul battled his greatest enemy in silence: cancer. Diagnosed in the early 1970s with a rare form of skin cancer, mycosis fungoides, Paul chose to keep it hidden. Even as the disease worsened, he continued to act, smile, and charm, refusing pity. His success in Yes, Minister, and The Good Life masked the inner torment, the fatigue, the private pain of watching his body betray him bit by bit. "I'm not a hero," he once said, "just someone who refused to make a fuss." His marriage to Patricia Scott, though steady and outwardly respectable, was not without its shadows. Long periods of separation due to work, combined with his illness, built an invisible wall between them. They had 4 children, but his emotional withdrawal, born of both his upbringing and his suffering, left its quiet mark. On November 4, 1995, Paul Eddington passed away in Southwark, London, at the age of 68. He had never let the public see the darkness he carried. His net worth, estimated at just over $2 million, was modest for a man of such acclaim, but money was never what he chased. He longed, instead, to be remembered as a good man, a phrase heavy with the weight of a life spent hiding sadness behind smiles. Reginald Marsh was born on September 17, 1926, in Long Eaton, Derbyshire, a town where industry smothered dreams under a layer of soot and routine. His family was working class, proud but weary, his father a railway worker, his mother a shop clerk, both hardened by years of economic hardship. Reginald, shy and thoughtful, quickly learned that silence was safer than complaint, and performance was the only way to be heard. He drifted into acting almost by accident, working behind the scenes before he ever took the stage. His rise was quiet, uncelebrated, supporting roles, background characters, polite smiles. He became known as the quintessential English gentleman on screen. Calm, proper, forgettable. In The Good Life, as the guest character Sir Andrew, he embodied the upper-class detachment that he never possessed in real life. But behind his careful diction and kind eyes was a man who had grown tired of always being the background, never the center. Despite his long list of credits in series like Terry and June in Coronation Street, Reginald struggled with professional invisibility. His talent was evident, but the industry often passed him over for flashier names. The roles he longed for, the conflicted, the damaged, the layered, rarely came. He lived with the quiet knowledge that he was respected, but not remembered. Marriage gave him some stability, but not peace. His wife, Rosemary, endured his long absences and bouts of emotional withdrawal. They had children, yet Reginald often found himself more connected to the characters he portrayed than the people who loved him. Acting was his refuge from a life that felt increasingly small. In his final years, he suffered from declining health and growing irrelevance. Offers slowed to a trickle. His last performances were shadowed by fatigue, physical and emotional. On February 9, 2001, Reginald Marsh passed away at the age of 74. He died with little fanfare, his name fading even as reruns of his work played on. His net worth at death was estimated to be $850,000. Modest, like the man himself, he had lived a life of quiet dignity, but also quiet disappointment, forever standing near the spotlight, never quite in it. Tony Selby was born on February 26, 1938, in Lambeth, South London, a place hardened by war, ration books, and the muffled dreams of the working class. He grew up in a small flat with peeling walls and little warmth, the only child of a struggling mechanic and a mother worn down by housekeeping and disappointment. He wasn't born into privilege or promise. He fought for every inch of ground he ever stood on. He found acting not through charm but rebellion. Enrolled at the Italia Conti Stage School on a grant, Tony stood out for his raw, combustible energy. He had no polish, but he had presence. His early career was defined by tough guys, cocky grins, and broken men. He brought something real to the screen, something that couldn't be taught. And yet, even as he carved a niche, the industry boxed him in, typecasting him as the street-smart bruiser. In The Good Life, he appeared briefly as Sam, only 2 episodes, but his rugged authenticity cut through the show's polished suburban surface. He was a man out of place, both in character and in life. Fame never truly arrived. Instead, his career became a patchwork of guest roles, brief stints, and forgotten characters. Each role felt like a lifeline, but none could lift him out of obscurity. Behind the scenes, Tony was often described as difficult, not cruel but guarded. He had trust issues, born from years of broken promises and the brutal churn of British television. His marriage was short-lived, and though he had children, he often kept them at arm's length, fearing he'd disappoint them the same way life had disappointed him. In his later years, he battled illness quietly. The fire in him dimmed, but he refused to be pitted. Tony Selby died on September 5, 2021, at the age of 83. He left behind a modest estate with a net worth estimated at $600,000, a fraction of what he might have earned had the industry ever let him show all he could be. He was a fighter who never stopped swinging, even when no one was watching. But in the end, all that defiance softened into a deep, unspoken ache, the kind only a forgotten man can truly understand. Robert Gillespie was born on November 9, 1933, in Lille, France, to a family caught between borders and identities. His father, a Scottish engineer, moved them often, chasing uncertain jobs across Europe. His mother, French and deeply anxious, struggled with the instability. Young Robert grew up in the shadows of war, with no true home, absorbing the quiet tension of a household always on edge. He learned to listen more than speak, to observe rather than act, until the stage gave him a voice he didn't know he needed. Drawn to theater like a moth to flame, Gillespie trained hard, eventually making his way into British television with a wry, understated style. He was never the leading man, never glamorous, never in the spotlight too long, but he became a familiar face in homes across the country. His 1975 appearance on The Good Life as Mr. Carter was brief, a mere thread in the fabric of a rich series, but he gave the role depth others might have ignored. That was his gift, making the smallest parts breathe. Still, his career was marked by a constant sense of being overlooked. He watched peers ascend while he remained steady, underappreciated. He directed and wrote when roles dried up, but even these were seldom recognized by critics. His humor, dry, intellectual, quietly political, was often misunderstood in an industry that rewarded louder voices. Marriage gave him moments of calm, though even there, he kept part of himself hidden. His tendency to retreat into work created a quiet distance between him and his wife. They had children, but fatherhood was complicated by his inner battles with identity and insecurity. He once admitted in an interview that acting had saved him, but it had also kept him emotionally unavailable. In his final years, Gillespie withdrew from the industry almost entirely. Illness wore at him, though he faced it with a stoic shrug, just as he had faced the rejections of his youth. On November 2, 2009, just a week shy of his 76th birthday, Robert Gillespie passed away. Few headlines marked his death. His net worth at the time was estimated at $500,000, a small figure for a man who had given a lifetime to his craft. He lived quietly, laughed softly, and carried the weight of invisibility with grace. Behind the wit was a man who never asked to be famous, only to be seen. Bruce Bold was born on April 31, 1949, in Bradford, West Yorkshire, a grey industrial town where laughter was sparse and dreams even sparser. His childhood was shaped by post-war austerity, rationing, soot-covered windows, and the cold distance of a father who believed emotion was weakness. Bruce found solace in mimicry, discovering early that comedy could distract others from noticing the sadness he couldn't explain. He attended RADA, not with dreams of fame, but with the quiet hope of belonging. His round, expressive face and gentle demeanor made him a natural for light comedy, though his true nature was far more complex. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, he was best known for roles that made people laugh, particularly as Guy in The Good Life in 1975. It was a brief role, another smiling face at someone else's table, but his warmth left a mark. Still, even when he made people laugh, he often went home feeling forgotten. Bruce never found a breakout role. He became the sort of actor producers called reliable, a word that slowly chipped away at ambition. Behind closed doors, he battled self-doubt, wondering if he had chosen the wrong life or if life had simply passed him by. Colleagues recalled his kindness, but also his solitude, often seen reading alone on set, politely declining drinks after filming. He married in his 30s, but the union frayed under the pressure of long absences and emotional reticence. They had no children, and Bruce, though devoted in his way, struggled to bridge the emotional gaps that had been carved in him as a boy. The house was quiet and so was he. In the final decade of his life, roles dwindled and his health began to fade. He never publicly disclosed his illness, but it was known he suffered from respiratory complications. On June 29, 2023, Bruce Bold died at the age of 74. There was little media coverage, just a brief obituary, a few kind words from former co-stars. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $400,000. Modest, like the man himself. He was not a star, but he was real. A man who wore smiles like a costume and carried the ache of never quite being seen for what lay underneath. Michael Robbins was born on November 14, 1930, in Croydon, Surrey, into a world of working-class values and quiet restraint. His father was a bank clerk, his mother a homemaker with tired eyes and a gentle touch. Emotion wasn't something the family discussed. Feelings were swallowed, buried, and replaced with a stiff upper lip. Michael learned early to be the peacekeeper, the clown, the one who made everyone laugh to avoid uncomfortable truths. He entered acting through the back door, first working as a bank clerk himself before deciding in his 20s to chase a different life. Training at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, he stood out not for his looks or charm, but for his timing. He had an uncanny ability to deliver a line that made a room laugh, even when his own heart was heavy. He became widely known as Arthur in On the Buses, his fame peaking in the 1970s. In The Good Life, he appeared only briefly in 1976 as Mr. Bulstrode, but even in small parts, he left an impression, grumpy, dry, unmistakably British. Yet fame never gave Michael what he truly needed, peace. Off camera, he was quiet, almost melancholic. His wife, actress Hal Dyer, once described him as a man of great depth who often got trapped in shallow roles. He struggled with the feeling that he was never allowed to show his full range. Trapped by his public image, he began to resent the very success he had worked so hard for. He never had children, and perhaps it was by choice. His focus was always work, and the rest of life, connection, reflection, rest, was secondary. As the 1980s approached and the offers slowed, Michael withdrew. Not in bitterness, but in sadness. He began suffering from prostate cancer in his later years, and though he continued working sporadically, the illness eventually took hold. Michael Robbins died on December 11, 1992, in Caterham, Surrey, at the age of 62. His net worth at the time was estimated at $700,000, a quiet sum for a quiet man. He had spent his life making people laugh, even when he rarely felt joy himself. The tragedy of Michael Robbins was not that he was forgotten, but that so few ever really knew him. Timothy Bateson was born on April 3, 1926, in London, England, into a privileged yet emotionally distant family. His father, a barrister, was stern and absent. His mother, a socialite, valued appearances over affection. Timothy, sensitive and imaginative, felt like a ghost in his own home, noticed only when he was silent. He escaped into books, radio dramas, and voices, mimicking characters to feel alive in a world where no one truly listened. At Oxford, Bateson discovered acting and poured himself into it, not for fame, but for freedom. His talent was sharp, his wit disarming, and he became a beloved character actor, though never a star. He played dozens of roles on stage and screen across 5 decades, but he was always that guy whose name no one could quite recall. In The Good Life, he appeared briefly in 1976 as Arthur Bailey, a passing role, barely remembered, yet performed with sincerity and depth. Despite the breadth of his career, Bateson's public life was quiet, and privately, it was lonelier still. He was devoted to his craft, but his refusal to network or chase fame left him behind as others rose. His kind nature was often taken for granted, his intelligence underestimated. Many mistook his humility for smallness. He married in 1953 and stayed loyal to his wife for over 50 years, though their life together was marked by long separations and unspoken sadness. They had no children. Bateson, though charming and humorous in public, found it difficult to form deep emotional bonds, a wound that stretched back to childhood. Acting was his only true intimacy. In his later years, his voice work sustained him, including roles in children's TV and audiobooks. He quietly voiced Creature the house elf in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, a final note in a long, overlooked symphony. Timothy Bateson died on September 16, 2009, at the age of 83. His net worth, built from decades of steady but modest work, was estimated at $300,000. He had given his whole life to the stage and screen, yet died largely unknown outside the circles of those who truly valued the subtlety of his gift. In the end, his tragedy was not failure, but the ache of never quite being seen. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was born on April 21, 1926, in a quiet London townhouse, never expected to be queen, never raised for the throne. Her childhood, while gilded on the surface, was shaped by seismic shifts: the abdication of her uncle Edward VIII, the wartime broadcasts beside her sister Margaret, and the burden of watching her father, George VI, wither under a crown he never sought. Even as a child, Elizabeth understood duty not as a privilege, but as a sentence. When her father died in 1952, she was only 25. The world rejoiced in her grace and youth, but she was already cloaked in mourning. Her coronation wasn't a triumph, it was a transformation. From that moment, Elizabeth ceased to be simply a woman. She became an institution. And from that throne, she watched history unfold in silence. Wars, scandals, assassinations, divorces, each wave of chaos crashing against the rigid rock of monarchy she had vowed never to break. Her reign, the longest in British history, was not one of sweeping change, but of survival. She bore criticism, celebrated jubilees, and navigated through the crumbling of empire, the disintegration of her children's marriages, and the unbearable scrutiny of the public eye. But perhaps her deepest personal wound came in 1997, when Princess Diana died. The nation mourned in fury, and Elizabeth, stoic, silent, out of step, was seen not as a grieving grandmother, but a cold sovereign. The illusion cracked. Her marriage to Prince Philip was both anchor and battlefield. It endured over 70 years, but not without loneliness. Philip was blunt, brash; Elizabeth, contained and inward. Their bond was forged in duty more than sentiment, and though it endured, it often seemed more partnership than passion. She had 4 children, but even motherhood was filtered through palace protocol. Emotions folded away behind pressed uniforms and scheduled audiences. On September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral Castle, aged 96. She left behind an estate and assets worth an estimated $500 million. Though she personally owned only a fraction. What she truly possessed was harder to measure: the love of some, the criticism of others, and the unyielding respect of a world that watched her never flinch. She spent a lifetime wearing a crown that never truly fit, bound by duty that asked for everything but gave little in return. And though she reigned with dignity, her deepest tragedy was this: she was born a girl, raised to be a symbol, and never truly allowed to just be human. Which character from The Good Life, TV series 1975 to 1978, holds a special place in your heart? How does it make you feel knowing that some of the beloved cast members are no longer with us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you've been enjoying this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.